Pain is our body's message that we are in danger. Put your hand on a stove. Signal comes loud and clear. Ouch. The response mechanism is designed for you to take your hand off the stove. That's a good idea. Ostensibly, it's to stop the pain, but you're protecting your body. If you kept your hand on the stove, you'd burn your hand. Having two hands is very, very useful. So pain is very, very useful. By analogy, when things go very, very wrong in our lives, our bodies, our mind, our heart might be protecting us, guiding us in ways we might not have foreseen. Hello and welcome to the No Hair, All Heart podcast. I am your No Hair, All Heart host, Mookie Spitz, and I would like to talk about one of the most painful years of my adult life. And analogous to the hand on a stove example, in retrospect, this horrible, horrible year might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me explain. I think you'll be able to relate to this story, and it might even help sort through and differentiate good from bad, pain from pleasure, horrible things that happen for all the right reasons. And in retrospect, it comes down to learning the lessons that the pain, that the disaster was trying to teach us all along. Hot tub, time machine. Only these waters are pretty damn steamy. Back to March of 2019. 6 years. I can't believe it. The dangers of cognitive fatigue blog post I wrote. I'll put the link in the description. When I wrote this, I focused on this condition, self-diagnosing myself as being its patient, its victim. And I'd like to start where this thing left off and do a composite reading here between what I was logging at the time in terms of understanding what I was going through, and in retrospect, better understanding and appreciating the overall context, circumstances, and results of this experience. So as I byline then, the condition, namely cognitive fatigue, is real, pervasive, and can ruin your career and your life. Notice the ruin. Here's my story and what I did to defeat it and get back on track. As we'll see in a few, I hope, the condition, real, pervasive, didn't necessarily ruin my career and my life in so much as defeat a career and a lifestyle that I don't think was for me. And it wasn't so much getting back on track as changing tracks, changing it up. Newsflash, your life is bullshit. Newsflash, what you thought you wanted, maybe even needed, was not you. You were living someone else's life. You were living the life of someone you thought would be good for you, but it's not you, it's somebody else. Let me explain. Hashtag winning. 2018. For nearly 2 decades, I was on a roll. My career started accidentally and success came easily. That's not to say I wasn't ready or that I didn't work hard. Quite the contrary. I had prepped with the mandatory Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 plus hours. And in my sweet spot was relentlessly focused and determined. By any standard, I was talented, driven, and thriving. Beginning at the very bottom in what coworkers and I cynically called an HTML sweatshop, I stubbornly stuck to it, zigged and zagged from better jobs to worse jobs to better jobs, riding the wave. Combination of flexibility, relentlessness, and smarts got me from squalid office onto planes and into multi-million-dollar business pitches. Along the way, I increased my salary tenfold, 10x. Maneuvering between landmines and over speed bumps, I navigated a career path that matched my appetite, attitude, and aptitude. A quirky science geek and prolific writer, my talents energized gigs that demanded a combo of cognitive and creative savoir-faire. I pounded on keyboards and mugged in front of cameras to rocket at the convergence of science, marketing, and tech. Woo! Not only was I accomplished, I was having fun. The sheer joy and apparent effortlessness of my achievements engendered awe and jealousy. Put me anywhere to do anything, I was all in. Working evenings, weekends, always on call and standing by, I consistently won MVP. Jumping in any project to take myself and the whole team to a higher level, I boosted value and wins. I was a performer. The price I paid seemed insignificant compared to the benefits I received. Endless road trips kept me from my kids, but I frequently FaceTimed in. Non-stop effort allowed little rest, let alone sleep, but I somehow flourished on endless espresso shots and midnight sprints. Competitive intensity triggered typical work, politics, and drama. But we processed, rapidly reconciled, and moved on. Success engenders more success to the point things get taken for granted. That's the first sign of trouble when you consider yourself invincible. The healthy paranoia and feelings of insecurity that once forced close attention to detail and sweating the unknowns are slowly overshadowed by ego, confidence, and distraction. The biggest victories make you most vulnerable. I was too good to refuse, and so was the next step in my career. People talk about other people. That's what we do. That's how we're all wired. Perception is indeed reality, especially when it comes to hearsay. Reputations are created and destroyed based on personal branding, which, like the marketing of breakfast cereals or politicians, goes through inevitable ups and downs. Thanks to my stellar decade, I peaked. I was blue chip, a hot corporate ticket. Prophets are without honor in their hometown since everyone's seen them pee behind a barn, but mostly because their peers are competing for the same table scraps. Similar rules apply in business, where the only way to significantly boost one's salary and industry status is to jump to another company where personal liability can be turned into professional asset. So that's what I did that year, leaping from a great job to what looked like an incredible one. I would be doing what I had succeeded at before and more of it. A proven storytelling maestro, I'd be weaving strategic ideas with creative concepts to help win new business and grow existing clients. I'd manage my own extended team, mentor, and empower them with my mad skills. All systems initially seemed go. Meeting and exceeding expectations, my crucial first 90 days were a textbook case of outsider talent assimilating into a complex organization and nailing it. The risk senior management had taken by bringing me on was quickly rewarded by the benefit of hiring top talent that proved to be personally liked and professionally indispensable. To nobody's surprise, I was winning. Until to everyone's, I wasn't. The temptation to dramatize a life crisis is strong. Point to an event that in retrospect triggered catastrophe. Memories are imperfect, especially when emotions run high and the consequences are significant. But in this case, my runaway career train clearly flew off the rails the day my son broke his leg. Almost exactly 6 months into my exciting new job, on the very first business day of the new year, 2018, I got the call every parent dreads. My youngest son screaming into the phone, "Dad, I fell off my skateboard and I can't walk." OMG, here we go. Rushed to school holding his damp hand throughout the bumpy ambulance ride, excruciating wait and x-rays. Cast in crutches by his side throughout the long and agonizing first night home. An imperfect storm. The accident had broken my 12-year-old's left tibia. A spiral fracture. We were lucky the injury wasn't worse, yet unlucky in that it should never have happened at all. Across the broad universe of human misery, this incident certainly scores pretty damn low. Kids break bones all the time. Pleasure and pain are relative, though their metrics subjective. We faced months of dread ahead. His recovery was slow and arduous, and as a doting dad, I projected my own shock and fear by overdoing his caregiving. Instead of situating him comfortably on the living room couch, I carried him endlessly up and down 3 flights of steps to and from his bedroom. Terrified of his vulnerability, I worried about him constantly and obsessed over his mood, sleep, and therapy. My son's physical wound cascaded into emotional wounds around the house. The rising tension triggered intense feuding with my life partner. Helpless witness to my son's suffering, I midlife crisised myself into spontaneous and ill-planned vegetarianism. Former low-carb protein diet haplessly flipping into a toxic onslaught of bread and baked foods, wreaking havoc on my mind and body. Weaving a cohesive story from otherwise random events is inevitable when those events are horrible and hit you all at once like a ton of bricks. So as my son mended, our household was of course invaded by bed bugs, infested by mice, and ravaged by the flu. The mounting domestic disasters would have been comical had they not exacted such a cumulatively destructive toll. The acute incident with my son and escalating crises at home exacerbated my growing vulnerabilities at work. Cracks had already started to form in my performance. My son's break, catalyzing more subtle and deeper breaks throughout the rest of me. He'd obviously overextended himself with that Tony Hawk skateboard stunt. Was I doing the same with my career? First published by Lawrence J. Peter in 1969, the Peter Principle originated as satire but has since evolved into a cautionary tale for recruiters and candidates alike. Top performers get promoted to senior positions, usually leadership roles, based on the often erroneous assumption that being good at one job makes them great at another. Was I getting a slap of cold reality and I hit my ceiling? A dream gig to nightmare grind. What began as a thrilling rush of intriguing new responsibilities was starting to wear me down. Up to then, I had flourished as the strategic capability of an interdisciplinary team. Leveling up, I found myself managing a staff and overseeing multiple projects. Thought leader had morphed into project leader with added workload that demanded entirely different capabilities. Once firing on all cylinders and comfortably in the driver's seat, I became head of a pit crew tackling 1,000 technicalities I could no longer take for granted. In prior gigs, I was summoned for my ability to simplify the complex, turn an otherwise banal presentation into a scintillating and memorable performance, then race away. Here I had to keep the engine running. Accustomed to zooming around and around at 200 mph, I operate best where the heat is on, the air is thin, and the bullshit is thick. I overpromise and underdeliver, but in such a way that the promise becomes, in and of itself, the delivery that clients crave and eagerly pay for. Grease, rubber, and oil instead demand true grit, teamwork, and organization. I was getting burned. While my son struggled at home, I struggled at work. Simple tasks were becoming difficult, tough ones impossible. I had trouble concentrating, processing the tsunami of hourly emails and blizzard of swirling projects. Prioritization was slipping, and with it, effective time management, I compensated by sleeping less. 5, then 4, then 3 hours per night. On the surface, I was hanging on, but my grip started to slip. All the positive feedback I enjoyed throughout my career flipped into the red. I was treading water, then swimming upstream. Tiredness beget exhaustion. Instead of firing away at new opportunities, I was busy dodging bullets. Metaphors mixed as I feverishly ran to just stay in place, sprinting yet losing ground. Corporate life is like poker. All it takes is a couple bad beats and your winning streak is crushed. Mine were in the form of high-profile projects my former self would have effortlessly knocked out of the park. Instead of cranking slides and energizing teams, I slugged espresso at 4 a.m. and paced in front of my laptop, unable to think clearly or work efficiently. My brains were blown. Bright light to burnout. Without realizing it at the time, I was suffering from a debilitating case of ... cognitive fatigue. Now let me insert my 2025 self here that this is only part of the story. And now let me segue back into my 2019 self, sorting out this train wreck, and then put the pieces together. So back 6 years ago, cognitive fatigue, as I was coming to understand it through this self-diagnosis, was originally grouped with traumatic brain injuries. The condition now viewed by psychologists and therapists through the lens of extreme sensory overload causing stress and exhaustion. The implications are declining performance, loss in productivity, and reduced quality of life. 3 strikes, you are out. Debate continues as to its classification, epidemiology, and societal impact. I don't play a doctor on TV either, but after enduring its symptoms and suffering from its results, I can directly relate. Not someone who rationalizes away his personal responsibilities with the fait accompli of a medical condition. The definition nonetheless resonates for me. Don't let this happen to you. Mental or cognitive fatigue, CF, can be defined as a decrease in cognitive resources developing over time on sustained cognitive demands, independently of sleepiness. Put a little pin on that one too. Independently of sleepiness. More on that later. CF can be observed in the context of various attentional and executive cognitive functions with, amongst others, developing difficulties to suppress irrelevant information during selective attention, increased hesitation and time needed to plan, weakened cognitive control and decreased high-level information processing, or even declining physical performance. CF is also a significant contributing factor in loss of productivity. That kind of begs the question, doesn't it? Poor academic and professional performance, ditto, increased risks of accidents and reduced quality of life in normal and clinical populations. Although fatigue as a global phenomenon has been investigated for more than a century now, the impact of CF at personal and economic levels continues representing an alarming figure in modern societies. Okay, makes sense. When leg muscles are overworked, they fatigue, make walking difficult, running impossible. When the mind is similarly overworked, it too becomes fatigued. Cognitive tasks increasingly difficult, eventually impossible. Debility is analogously progressive. Soreness, limping, infirmity for the leg, irritability, insomnia, put a pin on that, insomnia or lack of sleep, ellipsis, ... loss of concentration and productivity for the mind. And I'm assuming productivity for everything else too. On crutches, my son needed help every morning getting onto a school bus, which arrived late or not at all. On a vegetarian diet, my body got fat and my brains got protein deprived. On ice, my domestic life, my romantic life suffered and exacerbated everything else. And on the hook, dozens of work projects distracted me from skill areas where I naturally flourish and needed to shine, yet went blank. Bed bugs, mice, and the flu did not help. Before I knew what hit me, I was completely overwhelmed. Ideas that once flowed spontaneously were blocked. Projects that took 15 minutes became interminable. These symptoms were my brain's way of telling me that this muscle was fatigued, that it needed rest. Bing, bing, bing. Like it or not, I was headed toward shutdown mode. A year into my dream job, I was out of there. Packing my things up, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, most of them relief. I had a great run, nearly 2 decades of continuous growth and personal improvement. I made some mistakes, but always bounced back. I'd bounce back from this too, but knew fundamental things had changed. Dead ends force maps to be redrawn. Amen to that, my 2019 self. Seems like we're more or less on the same page. Now let's start to bring your perspective and mine together. It's fascinating to listen to oneself from the past. There's a whole lot of you there, but then there's a whole lot of me missing, as it were. Does age, does time make us smarter, wiser, more experienced? Well, yes and no, if you could learn lessons. Not everyone does. I'm trying. Anyway, mirror, mirror. Arguably, the most dangerous aspect of success is how it can mask critical flaws that remain unseen until too late. Evident on the corporate level, where exponential growth often hides systemic problems such as the housing and dot-com bubbles, and obvious on the individual level when personal problems finally catch up to and unexpectedly destroy the careers of celebrities. High performing talent also tends to be quirky, demanding a commensurate level of oversight and encouragement to accentuate prodigious strengths and downplay and even ignore glaring weaknesses. The brightest lights cast the longest shadows, so accomplished coaches understand how such chaotic but constructive energy needs to be channeled rather than switched off. I'm no different. I'm phenomenal at some things, bona fide world class when it comes to crafting a terrific story, reading and understanding where clients are at, and owning a room. At others, I flat out suck, such as attention to detail, rigorous process, following up, following rules. No, not for me. Other skills vary depending on my fickle, often childish mood, such as getting my darting thoughts down on paper. Paradoxical for a born writer. Future 2025 caveat on that too. Don't believe the hype, especially when it comes from an unsympathetic boss or HR. More later. My strengths and weaknesses are often complements of each other. My strong sense of intuition and lightning fast mind can instantly see the solution. But jumping to conclusions can be dangerous, and teams often feel steamrolled. Amen to that. My impulsiveness works miracles if the context is right. But if imbalanced or inappropriate, can lead to embarrassment or disaster. Bada bing, bada boom. By this career stage, age admittedly became a factor too. 2025. I'm calling bullshit on that, but I will allow you to continue more later on that topic as well. Skating into my 50s, I was no longer a young buck. I'm making faces as I read this, FYI. Things you enthusiastically do when you're 20 become unwelcome tasks as you get older. Okay, maybe, like having friends, but I digress. As you age, tolerance for doing what you don't want to do to get to where you think you should be succumbs to sheer inertia. Yes, amen. Some call it wisdom, others laziness. I'm calling it right now being smart and being courageous. More later. Was my burnout caused by internal or external factors? Innate behaviors or extraneous circumstances. Would have, could have, should have things been done differently? The counterfactual what if makes us feel better as it distracts us from dealing with the immutable past. But I believe we're better off looking ourselves in the eye, taking personal responsibility in the present. Damn straight. And not only in the present, but 6 years later, thinking about this train wreck, making sense of it, extracting even more lessons, and frankly, patting myself on the back just for surviving this shit. Anyway, free your mind. Cognitive fatigue is genuine and pervasive, but like most medical conditions, management and even prevention are possible and necessary. Just as diet and exercise can delay type 2 diabetes, knowing oneself and one's limitations can control mental exhaustion. Speaking up is also important. The world always wants as much as it can take from you. Only you can set the boundaries. Much applause from the sidelines. In retrospect, I should have asked for time off and taken a plane by myself to nowhere. Simmering my head inside a bucket of whiskey or airing it out on some Himalayan mountaintop could have worked wonders. Instead, I was immersed in a state some have described as the fog of war, where panic swaps simple proactive solutions with complicated reactive errors. Correct. I would also add to that list always being a yes man, which I intimated at the early part of this harangue. Yeah, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Sure, I'll take that on. Why? Be selective in what you do. Be a filter in terms of what you take on and whom you become. More on that later, too. Hindsight is 20/20 because gaining a sense of perspective is much easier after the smoke clears. Meditation serves a similar purpose, clearing the mind of all distraction. You can wake back up and focus on what actually counts. That's also why highly successful people recommend you never check email before coffee. We all need quiet, reflective time before facing the busy day ahead. Maybe. Sensory overload is the opposite of the Zen-like stillness required to process stimuli accurately and respond meaningfully. I'm calling bullshit on that too. Attacked from all sides, we shift from calm success mode to desperate survival mode. Garbage in, garbage out. The irony is that stopping everything and doing nothing is usually the best solution, giving mind and body their much needed rest and reboot. 2025 cents. The irony is that quitting your fucking job and transforming your entire life is usually the best solution. ... Giving mind and body their much needed reboot. Less about rest, more about rebooting, realigning. From an early age, I dreamed of becoming a celebrated scientist. My hopes dashed with the eventual realization that my math abilities were impressive, but not of the caliber necessary to play ball at that level. A friend of mine has a doctorate in astrophysics from MIT, so I've often gushed enviously at his abilities, fessing up my frustration at not being nominated for a Nobel Prize. Don't feel bad about it, he shrugs. Everyone has a math ceiling. I hit mine the last year of graduate school. Sailing along until then, I felt like I suddenly struck a brick wall. I sweated out and got my PhD, but I was in over my head. He's since gone on to a great career in cybersecurity systems, no looking back or regrets. But his lesson is a good one. A reminder that we all have a limit. And this is not just a hierarchical vertical limit. It's a horizontal one too, in terms of putting yourself where you need to be rather than letting yourself become someone you're not. FYI. Fixing what's broke. I've always been obsessed by genius, not so much amazed by how it shines, but by the mystery of how it fades. How can the same guy who created Jerry Maguire go on to make Aloha? How could Einstein revolutionize science by thinking up relativity theory only to be taken out to pasture by rejecting all of quantum mechanics? Apple fired Steve Jobs. Why do the mighty fall? Be careful what you ask, because the universe will one day answer you, personally, profoundly, and with painful insights. I'm no Leonardo, but I've always been that annoying whiz kid making difficult things look easy until the easy becomes difficult. Bouncing from hero to zero is surprising and humiliating, yet an important allegory in self reflection, healing, and rebirth. Pain, as I open this harangue with, is an eminently useful discomfort. Without it, we would burn, freeze, poke, cut, and mutilate ourselves into extinction. Cognitive fatigue is similarly protective, the mind shielding itself from being wounded by too much stimuli, the demand for too much response. My condition was actually a defense mechanism, urging me to do what the rest of me refused to accept. Move on. Truer words have never been spoken, 2019, a Mookie guy. But at the time of the writing, move on had a different kind of definition than what I understand it to be today. All this begs the question of the job I had, the career I'd been pursuing, and the future I now want. If cognitive fatigue is simply my body's way of saving itself, then clearly I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A vacation might have helped, but wouldn't have solved the core problem that my job and I were misaligned, that as I crashed and burned, nobody cared. So move on is what I did. Had no choice but to do. Aware of my limits, sensitized to my vulnerabilities, and appreciative of my distinct talents, I got long overdue rest, recuperated, and regrouped. Rather than tumble into the next inevitable professional phase, I took stock of my emotions. Rather than job searching, I did some serious soul searching. Who am I, really? At least I knew whom I wasn't, not anymore. Workaholic, nonstop go-getter, ADHD warrior, Instead, my personal and creative selves demanded attention, and they'd be appeased. My physical health and wellness also had to take priority, my body having gone soft as my brains worked too hard. Finally, after all these years, I was starting to pay attention. The motor mouth was listening. Yes and no. 2025, self. Can't help but intercede and comment here. The problems weren't being a workaholic, that nonstop go-getter, that ADHD warrior. My personal and creative selves indeed demanded attention, but here's how I fucked this up again. Here I claim they'd be appeased. They were not. More later. Healing and feeling. My son, who broke his leg back in 2018, is now playing flag football, running in the park. Fully healed physically and emotionally, we both reminisce about that terrible Tuesday and the months of pain and healing that followed. The whole experience bringing us closer together. Our household is calmer too, although every once in a while we see a mouse scurrying across the floor. Failing at vegetarianism, I've succeeded at regaining my fitness. My body atrophied from the endless work hours and travel. I'm now back to running, lifting, biking, and boxing. My mind again relaxed. I'm back to thinking clearly and working efficiently. The creative spark returning with gusto. Guitar, drums, and writing are where they belong. Priorities for a healthy life. For how long, buddy? Sorry for interrupting. Embracing the next phase in my career, I've shifted gears from company guy to consultant. Hung up the shingle and started my own business. The evolution enables me to adapt my unique skills to the jobs best suited to my abilities rather than force myself into a mold that can trigger anxiety and frustration. Back in the driver's seat, I steer my own destiny. You go, guy. One of my clients is an advocacy group that I truly believe can make the world a better place. Another client is an entrepreneur who is as kind as he is passionate. Other gigs abound where my strengths add immediate value and my weaknesses are overshadowed by others eminently more capable. Learning my limits, the opportunities have become boundless. This sounds like a promo brochure for a cult of Mookie 2019. Resourceful, driven, network. I moved on and again feel terrific. Okay, if you say so. By taking personal responsibility without taking things personally, I've successfully turned it all around. Sensitized to the warning signs, I'm better balanced and live happier and better, making it a point of making time for what sets my mind and heart at ease. Kids, creative pursuits, and laughter. Moving forward, eager for what's next, I feel like the protagonist in Vladimir Nabokov's Invitation to a Beheading, when at the end, free at last, he made his way in that direction where, to judge by the voices, stood beings akin to him. End of the day, bottom of the spreadsheet, the essential question we all need to answer is, what do we love doing and whom do we choose doing it with? Bravo! Now, why the cynicism here? Why the running commentary, the annoying annotation of my younger self? Well, this piece is interesting in the sense that I was almost, but not quite, figuring this shit out. Let's look at my self-diagnosis of cognitive fatigue. The big issue with this, and I recognized it in the blog at the time too, was the difference between symptom and cause. The cognitive fatigue was a symptom caused by being in the wrong career, establishing and creating a domestic situation that just wasn't working out. The bed bugs, the flu, my kid breaking his leg. Sure, there were added complications. Didn't quite help with the blood pressure at the time. But shit always happens. The universe always throws things in our face, including endless punches. Icing on the cake, the coup de grace of my own bullshit, was everything going wrong in my life, but the errors were self-inflicted. I rolled into this career without thinking of options. I rolled into this domestic situation by thinking of too many options. And the cognitive fatigue, as I described it, was accurate enough. But what was really going on was the realization that I was forcing myself to have that I was living the Talking Heads song. How did I get here? When days go by, I was fucked up. I wasn't myself. And I'm speaking now not only for myself in 2018 and then the recovery mode, the rationalization mode of 2019, but of thousands, millions of people who are in this same dilemma, male, female, in between, black, white, in between, American, non-American, in between, it doesn't matter. I think 98% of human problems stem from a misalignment between who we are as a person, innately, our individual, tweaky selves, and the situations that we find ourselves in. And the sad part of it is that we have more volition and more capacity to choose than what we are willing to accept, take on, and bring about. And as a result, this sense of rolling the dice does not hold good odds. It's thermodynamics, folks. It's random. A majority of tosses are not going to be in our favor. And rolling along and singing a song sounds romantic. It's the amour fati of the French and Nietzsche. And I've been doing it for years. But I had reached the point in 2018 where the logical culmination of my own bullshit was asphyxiating. And adding insult to the injury was the sleeplessness. I really think more so than the cognitive fatigue was just sleep deprivation. I was hating what I was doing. I was uncomfortable at home. And I was procrastinating and pushing things off the table and picking them back up. And it's no exaggeration, 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours of sleep chronically. That, more than any other single factor, took me over the edge. Sammy Hagar of Van Halen fame discusses the breakdown of Eddie Van Halen. I bring this up because I've referred to geniuses. I think the guy was a genius. I play electric guitar, and he cut himself his own swath of brilliance. You can tell that guy was playing within a measure or two. He had his own sound. He built his own instruments. He redefined rock and roll in his image. That is genius. That is being a goat. But the muse shined brightly from about 1976 to 96 for 20 years, and something happened. Who knows what happened? Could have been his divorce, drug addiction, a combination thereof, a stroke. And that guy woke up one morning and he could no longer write a good song or even play his instrument well. And that was his identity. That was who he was. And Sammy Hagar, his singer, songwriter at the time, his partner in rock and roll crime, noted the transformation. And the transformation is identical. I'm not claiming that I'm a goat, that I'm a trailblazer in my industry, but I suffered the same fate as Eddie Van Halen, as Sammy Hagar describes, where before he had this, whatever it is that happened to him, this breakdown, he would think of stuff on the fly. He would improvise effortlessly. The songs came magically, and it was all great. And after whatever it is that happened, he would agonize for weeks over a few chords, a few notes. And that was me in my home, pacing back and forth, unable to finish a slide in a deck. My brains were mush. I had burnt out. So yes, in ways it was cognitive dissonance, exacerbated by lack of sleep, but my hand was on the stove. Could you call this a midlife crisis? Perhaps. But I had fallen into this career trajectory. It had paid off in droves, and I had neglected my own creative self to the point of my own demise. And rather than recognize it, it's such a tendency when you're facing failure and so much is at stake, your habits, your pride, your sense of self. The tendency is there to double, triple, quadruple down rather than interpret the pain response properly, namely, ouch, take your hand off the stove. It's ouch. And then you leap on that stove, if only to prove to yourself and to the world and to that damn stove that you are not going to take a hot stove as an answer. You are going to own that stove. And the more it hurts and the more your body is burning up, the more pressure you put on it to prove otherwise. That is such a human tendency. And I have done that many times in my life. And this was the instance where I just hit hard and hit fast and hit badly in exactly this kind of way. And I go back to seeing so many people who are in endless years of therapy, who medicate themselves into oblivion because they don't see a way out. They are unwilling or unable to change it up. Rick Rubin had a little clip floating around on Instagram. Now he's all bearded, wearing literally rose-colored sunglasses. And I just like the guy because everything he's mumbling about is bang on point as far as I'm concerned. And here he was talking about changing things up. You're never trapped. He describes quit your job if you're feeling that stress. There's someone who could do it so much better than you and do it with enthusiasm. Free it up. Go walk on a beach. Go to Vegas. Blow it all. What are you afraid of? And again, we have limitations that are inherent as being members of civilization. But there's a range of behavior that you have at your disposal, which can open doors and possibilities if you're willing to take the leap, if you're willing to take the risk. And what I did, the risk that I took at this point, still having my kids to take care of, being in a partnership where I also felt I had strong financial obligations, was to shift from being an agency employee to opening up my own mini agency. Bravo. And I guess the universe reciprocated because I did pretty well for myself for years after I made this flip. But who cares? I was begging the question of why my hand was already on fire. It's not about just changing up the work dynamic. It had to do with changing up the work. And that is my 2025 takeaway of this rest and rehabilitation piece. I got it half right. The piece shouldn't be called The Dangers of Chronic Fatigue. A better title might be The Dangers of Being a Chronic Chicken Shit. And by that I mean the fatigue comes from not taking your hand off the stove. The fatigue comes from not being willing to take on risks, which ostensibly are far less than the risk you've already taken on to your health, to your wellness, to your quality of life, and your overall happiness by not changing it up. And then for some, it becomes a question of changing it to what? You got to know where you're going if you want a sense of which way to go. It's Alice and the caterpillar smoking the hookah. And for me, it's been self-evident since I was a kid. I need to tell stories. I need to sit here and rant. And whether a million people are listening to this harangue or nobody is irrelevant. because I can't imagine a better day spent than sitting here screaming into this microphone and making a point of view video and posting it and writing a blog and publishing a book or publishing a website. I need to let it out. And as long as I am doing that, everything is a-okay. And it doesn't have to do with ADHD forever no more, as I point out in this blog, where I'm most off the rails with my analysis of myself because I was in a self-pitying mood, in a mood where I had to change myself in order to be happy. That's the critical mistake with this self-assessment from 2019. It's not about not being a workaholic. Be a workaholic. Lock yourself into a room, or conversely, go out there and race NASCAR, skydive, go to Thailand and get laid, invest in crypto, bungee cord, do whatever it is that you want based on the passion that fuels it. And when you run out of money, then do what you gotta do. But just stay focused, keep your eye on the prize. And if you don't know what your prize is, chances are much, much higher that you'll find it if you don't have the opportunity costs of being busy doing shit that you hate or don't want to do anymore. Pay attention to your hand on the stove. As long as you do that, you'll keep your hand off the stove, and opportunities are going to present themselves for doing anything but burning the shit out of your hand and going through the agonizing process of not listening to your own body and mind. So my takeaway from revisiting this piece is it's incremental. I was almost there. I was almost figuring it out. 80, 85, 90% of that piece makes sense. And I was figuring it out. But the key missing elements were crucial, which is if you've got a chance, change it up. And all change, in a sense, is incremental, but you need the mind set to set your mind on living the life that you love. And if you get that right, if you feel it and you do it, then you're invincible. And who knows what happens from here? But I hope this inspired you as much as it's inspired me to revisit this audio rant next year, 6 years from now, and seeing how on point or off point I'm being in my enthusiasm for finally doing what I know I am here to do. Find what it is. When you feel it in your heart, go for it. And the universe will abide. Let me know what you think. And thank you for listening. More heart from this guy with no hair, but hopefully just a little bit of more wisdom. Paid for with a lot of burned extremities.